This is my 2002 Chevrolet C5 Corvette, and in this video I want to talk to you guys kind of as an overview of ownership, kind of a review of what it's been like to own this car, the good things, the bad things.
Your brakes might be on fire, I know.
Things that have gone well, the things I've enjoyed, the things I don't like, and why it's been my favorite car that I've ever owned. And at the end of this, I want to kind of talk about the reason why I'm selling it, because there's one big reason why I'm selling this car despite all the things I love about it. So let's get right to it. Now I want to start with the good things first because there's a ton to like about this car. Mine specifically I really like, but the C5 in general, why it's such a good value under $20,000. Still, if anybody asked me to today what car I would recommend if you have $20,000 to spend on a sports car, it's obviously always going to be a C5. I know it's a played out answer just like the Miata is. For those same reasons, this car is in a league of its own when it comes to dollar per value in performance. This car is not a Z06, it's just a base model, which was one thing that I wanted specifically in a C5 Corvette because I love being able to take the roof off. This car is a Targa. The base Corvettes are a Targa top, so you can still remove the center section of the roof and you still get that open air feeling with the car, just kind of out of the box, and it doesn't have the same drawbacks that normal convertibles have that I don't think look very good. I like having the Targa. You can just pop the roof off, throw it in the trunk, good to go. You get the open top, but then you also get the hard top look as well. And another reason why I went with the base model C5 Corvette over a Z06 is that there is a decent price difference between the two in the used market. The Z06, if you find a low mileage one owner car or something like that, they do tend to hold their value really well. They're seen more as a collector car than a regular C5 is. So this car represents an even better value per money than something like a Z06 does. But to me, the price difference doesn't really justify the performance difference because I knew I was going to modify the car, and stock versus stock, the C5 Z06 and the C5 base car are not that different. This car's engine is decently modified, so all of that goes out the window as soon as you start modifying the engine because I quickly surpassed what a base Z06 kind of starts at really fast. Those modifications that the Z06 has, this car has aftermarket parts for. Speaking of performance, that's actually the main reason why I bought this car. But mainly I wanted a car that I could build for track days, HPDE, autocross. If you haven't seen anything on my channel, go check out some of those other videos that I have at NCM, which is one of my favorite tracks in Bowling Green, Kentucky, right there next to the Corvette Museum. It's a fantastic track if you've never been there. But that's the main reason why I bought this car, and I built it the way that I did because I wanted to have something set up for road courses, for fun track days and things like that. So obviously performance was a key factor here. And this car out of the box, C5 Corvettes are a fantastic starting point. Even in stock form, this car is a great track car. There are a few things that I would necessarily say that you probably have to do safety-wise that I would feel comfortable out on track, but you could buy a bone stock C5 Corvette and have plenty of fun out on a racetrack. Actually, in fact, you could probably buy a minivan and have fun out on a racetrack. If you've never been actually out on a track at one of these track days, it's so much fun, you need to do it. This car actually has heads, a cam, long tubes, it's got an intake manifold, full exhaust, a few things that make the car, it probably makes around 400 to 450 wheel horsepower. So the car doesn't feel slow, but it doesn't feel like scary fast or anything like that. It's a really good balance of an NA naturally aspirated, tons of torque everywhere when you're out on a racetrack or just driving on the highway or anything. Pretty much any gear you're in at any time, you can put your foot down and get moving. And a few of the modifications that I made to the suspension of this thing to help improve performance over the stock car were coilovers and sway bars. Now, I actually recently made a video about this, but really I think the biggest benefit to the stock suspension would be sway bars. The car, shocks are not that expensive. You can actually replace the stock shocks with a set of Bilstein Shocks for a reasonably inexpensive price. I think it's like $400 or $500 for the whole sets for some brand new ones, which I could have bought the sway bars and shock absorbers for less than the price of the coilovers, which if I had to do it again, I probably would do it that way because the sway bars are what I've noticed the most amount of difference in when it comes to the car's rocking side to side through corners. It's still a comfortable car to drive as stock, so if that's the way that you're going to use the car, it's fantastic for road tripping. So if you don't want to really push it in the performance direction, C5s are a great platform. The stock seats are very comfortable, which I'll get to in a little bit. It's a great car. It actually gets reasonably good gas mileage. You can't fit a whole lot in it, so it's not something you're going to take a family in, but if it's you, yourself, or you and one other person, it's a great road trip car. It's very comfortable. You can sit in it for hours. But that's not why I bought the car. I bought it for performance. So going back to that, as you can see here, these are a set of Apex EC7. These are 18 by 10s. I bought them squared because it kind of helps neutralize some of the understeer. From the factory, C5 Corvettes come with a staggered setup, so the back wheels are wider than the front wheels, and that works really well for traction. So if you do a lot of drag racing or things like that, having bigger back tires helps. When you start taking corners really aggressively, if you have a narrower front tire, it means that the car wants to understeer just a little bit more. Now, understeer is safer for most people who don't know how to handle cars very well, but I wanted a car that was more neutral. I didn't want it to be snappy, oversteer, dangerous, but I wanted to dial out some of that understeer a little bit. So I bought a square set of wheels for the car. And then around those are Hankook RS4 200 tread wear tires. They wear really well. I've put only a couple hundred miles of these on the street, so I haven't really abused them in any kind of way, and they still show almost all of their tread left. So I really like these. And lastly, when it comes to performance, since the car doesn't weigh a whole lot to begin with, the brakes actually are still factory.
Your brakes might be on fire. I know.
That was one thing that I thought I wanted to replace early on, especially if I was doing track days. But realistically, the car doesn't weigh enough, so if you're not crazy aggressive on the brakes,
your brakes might be on fire.
I put a set of Hawk HP Plus pads on the car, but these stock brake calipers and stock rotor size have been more than sufficient to stop the car in most track days. Like I said, for 30-minute sessions, if you're not really abusing the car, they run just fine. So really, that's not a whole lot of performance mods done to the car, and I think that it really sets it up nicely. I think it really puts it in a spot. The stock power is really great for the car. I would put a short throw shifter on it, which I do have on this car, just because the stock shifter is just kind of wobbly. Sway bars, shocks, and wheels and tires really transform the car into something it's got a good power plant, but it just needs to be modernized and tightened up a little bit in the suspension. So speaking of that shifter and kind of moving on to transitioning to the interior things that I've done to the car, this is where I've done a lot of work to it that's not stock. Obviously the steering wheel is not stock. The seats are not stock. I've made videos on the seats and stuff, so go check out my channel if you want to know more about these. These are Sparco Sprints. I really like them. I can't say enough good things about them, but the stock seats for me, like I said, since I bought this car as a track day car, I really needed something that held me in the seats better than the stock seats. Now they were comfortable, but they really just didn't hold you well enough when you're in hard cornering, things like that. Also, I wanted to run a harness. I wanted to run a Hans device out on track and then help get in and out quicker. Okay, I added a quick release, so you can take the steering wheel off. It makes it easier to get in and out of. When you put a Hans device and a helmet on, it gets really hard to get in and out of these cars, so that's been extremely helpful. Also, like I said, this is an MGW shifter. It's really one of my favorites. If you already have a Hurst, don't change it, but if you don't have anything, MGW all the way. And this cool gadget here, this is my digital rear view camera mirror thing. Again, I made another video about that. I'll put links to those in the description below if you want to see more detailed videos about these things. This is really cool because I put a camera right here in the back that points out the back. But other than that, it's pretty much stock in here. This is the stock C5 interior. I really didn't like, a lot of the plastics in here. I did put these door cards on here. They're kind of temporary. I've got the factory door panels that I could put back on, but for the time being, I thought about putting a cage in the car, so this helps free up a lot of space between the door that's not normally here. Normally, the actual door panel itself comes really close to the seat, so there's no room. So if you wanted to put a cage that ran down to the footwell, you can't do that with the stock door panels, but I didn't really like just seeing the bare inner door liner. Oh, and I almost forgot one of the most major modifications that I made to the car myself while I've owned it, which is vinyl wrapping it. I actually vinyl wrapped the car Suzuka Gray from Vivid Vinyls. It's actually an Audi color, I believe. And man, the car was pewter metallic before. The paint was in fantastic condition. There was no fading, no anything like that, but I just wanted to change the color. I'm a really big fan of white and red. If you haven't seen the other cars on the channel, it's pretty much kind of my thing. I did that and it looks fantastic. It actually really made the car something. I enjoyed the car before, but now seeing it with the red seats and the white exterior, it makes me really enjoy it, which is gonna make it even harder to sell, which I'll get to in a little bit. Now, I've been talking about a lot of good things about the C5, but it's time to move on to some of the things that are not so great about C5 Corvettes. Now, I just talked about the interior being not so great and the plastics not being so great, but the car is inexpensive. However, that is a negative point. I don't think the interior really is that great. I mean, I know the seats are comfortable, but beyond that, any of the plastics on the dash, the fake leather, the steering wheel, it's a really dated interior and it feels really cheap. Now the car isn't expensive, but if you're wanting something that has a really nice, luxurious feel on the inside, C5 Corvettes are not where you want to go. Now I built mine for track use, so obviously these luxury items are not something that were on my mind. Although I did put a double DIN radio unit in for the radio, which made a big difference. I could use Apple CarPlay and things like that. But beyond that, there is nothing fancy about the interior. There's nothing luxurious, nothing feels nice. Really, like the plastics are really cheap feeling. So that's definitely one strong negative point against the car if it's something that you want to daily drive and you really care about things like that. And then one of the most major issues that you could run into if you buy the wrong Corvette is that the Corvette's platform is known for their clutches being really difficult and time consuming to get to. Obviously with the split transmission, the clutch is up the front with the engine and the transmission itself with the gears are in the back, and you have the torque tube that goes between them. It's really hard to get to if you have to replace the clutch. Now that's one thing that I put in this car because I had access to professional mechanics who helped me do this slowly. I didn't have to pay a shop really expensive rates to do this. But in order to get to the clutch assembly, so even if something as simple as like the slave cylinder dies, that's not an expensive part, you have to drop the rear end and the torque tube to get to that. And that's a lot in labor. So that's something that you really want to be careful with when you're buying a C5 yourself, that the clutch hasn't been burned up and abused if you're buying a manual. Don't buy an automatic. Plus, if you want to buy a manual, it's a Corvette, buy a manual. Please buy a manual. And yeah, that's really just about it. I really hope this isn't too long of a video, and if you stuck around to this far, thank you. If you like the videos, like the video down below. If you're new to the channel, definitely consider subscribing. I really appreciate that. But yeah, owning the C5 Corvette has been one of my favorite cars. I've done the most stuff in it. I've had the most experiences with it. I've taken it to track days, I've taken it on road trips, I drive it to work sometimes. It's been a lot of fun in every kind of way. I take it to car shows, all that stuff. It's been really great, and I've done a lot of fun things in it and made a lot of great memories in it, which is the main point of having a secondary fun vehicle. But unfortunately, like all good things, eventually they have to come to an end. And now we're at the point of the video where I get to talk about why I'm selling the car. Now, actually, this literally may be the last video I ever make of the C5 because I'm planning on meeting somebody tomorrow after work to sell it. But the main reason why I'm selling this car is because I bought another one. I was actually fortunate enough to get a place for a Porsche 718 Spyder last December. I bought the car and it should be here in 2 to 3 weeks. And so that's why I decided to sell the C5, which that was kind of one factor in it, but the real big factor was that all my other friends that I used to do track days with, they sold their track cars. So I really haven't driven the car much since. I haven't signed up for any days. I would do them by myself, but they're just not as fun without other people. And so I just decided that, you know, maybe it's time to go on to a new owner who will enjoy it even more than I do. I feel like once I get the Porsche in, I'm probably not going to drive this thing like at all. So I really just didn't want to have a $20,000 paperweight just sitting in my garage that I'm not using it for what I built it for. Hopefully somebody else will use it for what it's made for. So that's kind of a spoiler for new videos coming up. Definitely subscribe to the channel if you want to see more about the Porsche coming up. I'm gonna hopefully film it, you know, picking the car up from the dealership. I may go over like, you know, a build sheet and things like that. But I want to thank you for watching this video. If you are interested in buying a C5, you know, leave a comment down below, ask any questions that you want. There's a whole lot more to this car, but I didn't want to talk for half an hour, so you know, we're at where we're at. So I will catch you guys in the next video. See ya.